Good morning. Welcome to our podcast today. We have our guest, Eric Musau. Eric has visited our enterprises and he's also an expert in financial sustainability. So we'd like to get to a conversation with him today to get to learn about financial sustainability in aquaculture. So Eric, could you please introduce yourself?
Thank you very much, Sabila. It's a pleasure to be hosted by your team. And so I'm an investment banker by profession. I've been in the industry for about 20 years. I work for a local investment bank licensed in Kenya. We are a full-service investment bank. It's called Standard Investment Bank. So we do asset management, advisory, and securities trading. I head the research division, and we also involved in sustainable finance initiatives, especially to assist our clients to navigate during this time, and also to create new products around this space, which is a growing one. Thank you.
Now, you have talked about Standard Investment Bank. So how do we incorporate financial sustainability with aquaculture and the blue economy?
Yeah, so it's a very important topic, and aquaculture generally as a sector and in the economy is an important one. When you look at the issues generally, there's and on sustainability, maybe specifically, there's even global standards. When you look at, for example, the GRI standards, the Global Reporting Initiative, I think is standard 13. There's a specific topic that really covers agriculture, aquaculture, and fishing, and so that gives almost a basis of what a company needs to do in that specific sector. And when one is making an assessment about that sector, they're able to see which are these topics or which are very important when looking at the impact on society, negative or positive or potentially negative, and so forth. So in a nutshell, that's one of the key international frameworks governing sustainability in the aquaculture and fishing sectors. I would say on a national scale, there's generally regulations that govern the sector, depending on whether it's a lake, whether it's an ocean, and obviously these entities. I mean, if you're doing agriculture, you kind of fit into a society, and again, depending on how that's working, if you're next to a lake, maybe there's a beach management unit, and there's an element of interaction there. There's a society, the immediate society. So I think those are really the things which one has to consider quite carefully when they're in this sector. But I did note that I think jumbo fish, or it's based in a rural society, and you could tell the integration of the facility in the community, and really that makes a big difference. Yeah, thank you.
Now, speaking of jumbo, you did visit our farm. You also visited our other enterprise, Vembrick. How did you get to know about these enterprises?
Yeah, I was introduced to Jumbo and Vembrick, I think part of the Aquaculture Consortium, through a mutual friend who introduced me to Felix, your founder. And that's how I got to find out about it. I mean, he invited me and told me if I ever went to Western Kenya, then I can just pay a visit. And shortly afterwards, I think it might have been less than a month, I was heading to Western Kenya. And I asked him whether I could visit, and he was quite kind to facilitate that, at least provide me the contacts of the people in the respective facilities, and I was able to go to Vembrick, which is at the shores of Lake Victoria, and then also Jumbo Fish Farm, which you kindly hosted me, and I actually slept at your facility. You have a cozy facility there, so thank you very much for that hospitality.
You are very much welcome. What sets us apart? What is unique about the Aquaculture Consortium? What is unique about Jumbo and Vembrick?
Yeah, when I think about it, I think there's a substantial integration, from the food value chain all the way to market. When you look at a lot of the facilities, at least the ones I've visited, they're usually not integrated end to end. When you think about either if it's food or if it's getting the fingerlings and maybe getting to market, if it's either the fish. So I think the Aquaculture Consortium has put in a lot of effort to try and ensure that they have a well-knit structure where there's quite a bit of integration and consideration about all the different pockets and value chains around the aquaculture sector. And for me, that was very unique. Of course, I did also visit the facility, and there was the hospitality element, and I think that's also a unique play. I think hospitality and people looking to learn the aquaculture sector, I think that's an important component as well that I think could even grow. And I think hospitality, agriculture, our cities are increasingly getting congested, and these are generally opportunities to be able to do a little bit more. And I think from that standpoint, it's something that is of interest.
Now, Eric, earlier on, you have told us about financial sustainability in the context of aquaculture. What makes it crucial for this industry?
Yeah, so when you look at that progress, especially when you're looking at now the financial component, I probably mentioned and tilted more on the sustainability component. But when you're looking at the financial component, I think there's an important element around just the viability of the overall project. How well are you utilizing your facilities? Be it how many fingerlings are you able to produce? Are you able to sell all of them? How much fish are you able to produce, say in the fish ponds? And are you able to get to market with those? And what is your route to market? And what pricing are you getting for that? I did see Vembrick, the one that packages the small fish, the processes and packages those small fish. Again, the route to market and the cash flow cycle around that is really critical. And more importantly, also scaling that. Ultimately, one has to look at the business and how can it scale, in the different pockets that's focusing. And for me, that's really critical. Obviously, you're living in a community, and for that one, I see it quite clearly. There aren't many issues when you think about, for example, waste. That was very well integrated. It seemed to have been a very well developed facility. And at the time I went to Vembrick, I think you are processing to just near the lake, and that facility was really good. We look at the cold chain component and so forth. So I think it's just a matter of being able to utilizing that facility to the fullest. And generally all the facilities, at least the two facilities that I visited, my sense was just that maybe they need to be slightly more utilized. For Jumbo Fish Farm, I think we had a portion of the land which is not utilized, and also the fish farm. I think there was harvesting that had already happened. So how do you ensure that the facility is well utilized and there's a good progress on that end? But when I think about the entire facility, I feel very confident that it's a business which is very promising. Yeah, thank you.
Now, as an investor, you have said the business is promising. Would you invest?
Yeah, certainly. It looks very viable. Obviously, I didn't look at the numbers in any great detail. I was mostly doing a tour, but I could see the potential. When I think about, I think some of the clients were mentioned, especially on both the domestic market and the export market. So you're already even on the export market. And that's really important. And the local market for fish is also quite attractive. So that's also a very important play, because the fish market, we might be looking at targeting large markets, but Kenya is a market on its own. We import a lot of fish, and I had that discussion around how you're actually able to serve the local market, as well as serving farmers who ultimately serve the local market. And when you think about food chains and the need for white meat, fish obviously comes at the top. And if you're able to have affordable feeds, because I think there were challenges around the feed value chain and the cost of feed. If that's able to be addressed, then certainly it seems like it would make for a good investment.
Okay. Just a minute. Santino, do you have any questions?
Yeah, Eric, it's a pleasure meeting you again. And I'm actually surprised within the short visit you had to our enterprises. You seem to have grasped a lot. It seems our teams on the ground are doing a great work.
Yes, you did. Thank you very much, Santino. I really enjoyed the visit.
Yeah.
And your team obviously were really helpful across the different spaces. Thank you.
Okay, maybe I can just ask how do you keep updated with the local trends and practices, regulation within the aquaculture sector?
So I did mention the GRI regulations, which are global in nature. And on a national level, of course, you do have regulations. You do have the Ministry of Blue Economy and regulations generally that manage the sector. At the county government level, there's general regulations, and aquaculture is something that government generally is quite keen on. I know there are government programs to try and really stimulate the sector. And it's not even just regulation, it's also just initiatives that the government is doing to try and ensure that the sector is vibrant and that farmers and players in that value chain are comfortable and they're able to work well. And I know those are very important initiatives from that standpoint. From the fishing facility of those, there was the beach management unit, which are essentially third-party players, and the rules they create are very important generally for a business operating in that environment. And once you start, for example, putting the fish cages in the lake, I think they mentioned to me that they had a specific location where they were doing the fish cages, so that if there's no conflict between the section where the normal fishermen are doing the fishing and where the fish cages are done. And I think also there was an issue around how to ensure that security is done in a joint way and so forth. So I got the sense that there was quite a bit of, I think the regulations are mostly actually to try and enable the sector. I don't think the regulations are actually in place to impede the sector. I think there's a lot of optimism, and I could get all the stakeholders who are really keen to try and get this sector growing at a much faster rate than it is currently growing.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe you just spoke about the environment, and as the aquaculture, we are really trying to streamline our operations so that they are environmentally sustainable.
Yeah.
What steps would you advise that we can take to ensure that to streamline our environmental sustainability in the sector?
I mean, when I looked at it, obviously there's what one can look at from just a farm visit, and then there's maybe documentary and governance issues. But when I looked at just the facility, the Jumbo Fish Farm is located next to a stream which joins into Nzoia River, and that looked to be from a water perspective. I mean, agriculture consumes a lot of water and fish, and obviously that's not a big challenge for you. I think there's also the issue of if you do any of the processing or if you're doing any chemicals that you use in the facility before you discharge to the stream, how then? And I think I saw something around how that's managed at your facility. So it already seemed like you do quite some good work. On the fingerlings, I also noticed that you don't kill the fish when you are trying to, I think, increase. I'm not getting the right words. I'm not a technical person, but I'm sure there's that word when you're sort of increasing. Yes, that's the word. Yes,
the catfish.
That is, yes, the catfish. You don't kill the fish, and that, I think that's also a very important component when you think about just the type of initiative that you do and all that. Yeah, and the quality of the facility was also really good. I think I saw solar. I think one of it had been damaged by, I think, some winds, and I think it was mentioned that it was going to be replaced. So again, I think on use of energy, there's already that initiative around use of renewable energy, which is quite good. Yeah, so in a broad sense, I really didn't see anything of concern. I think for you guys, you're really just good to go. It's just being able to utilize your facilities well. Just increasing your capacity and maybe looking at your route to market, because I think your hospitality business, I didn't see too many other visitors, so I think it's just ramping up that capacity and being able to bring in the revenues. But from an infrastructure perspective, I think you've done a pretty good job. Even if you need any money, probably it's working capital or something, maybe for the new facilities, but you guys were really doing a good job at that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Speaking, we just spoke about utilizing our facilities and resources. Maybe you can just ask, maybe how can Jumbo and the TAC enterprise as a whole incorporate financial sustainability into their broader business strategy?
Yeah, so it's just to ensure that if the business are depending on each other, how do they what is the profitability metrics of each business line? So because if you have the feeds division, I'm sure some of the feed goes into some of the other divisions, but how, again, as the feeds division, does it ensure that it is profitable, and maybe it can also sell to external clients? I know Jumbo is mostly, I think, services mostly external clients, and although maybe some of the fingerlings which are produced are also used in the fish ponds which are done. And also to grow the market. I think the facility which was doing the packaging of the fish, I think that one is poised to grow because you're moving into a much bigger facility. And I had, in addition to the Lake Victoria beach point, the Luanda Kotieno, apart from that beach facility, the other beach beaches could be able to feed in and be able to provide more supplies, because that facility looked like it would be quite big. Obviously, if you get more supply, then at some point you might need more packaging capacity, and of course you need to work on your market and potentially also cash flow, because some customers might not be able to pay immediately if it's supermarket, which means you'd have to look at your working capital cycle at the supermarket level. Especially if you grow, you might not be able to choose your clients. You might want to capture as big a market as possible. And then if it's fingerlings, ensuring that you're able to produce it and match with the farmers. I think there was an initiative around working with farmers, because if you also know, if your farmers are profitable, especially on the fingerlings business, if your farmers are profitable and you're looking at their value chains, you can know when they need to restock. You can know, then on your end, you're able to know how you produce your fingerlings, so that you're also not just surprised farmers just showing up on your doorstep and asking for 200,000 fingerlings, because I'm sure, Kenyan farmers, I know they could do that. So I think it's just to be maybe closer to farmers, and I think I heard there was an initiative of that sort, so that, as a market, and just training them, because if they are profitable, it will also feed into your business. And of course, for the different markets, trying to look at that for your fresh fish, how are you able to grow in different towns? Obviously you grow in different towns if you have the capacity, but if you grow, then you might need to go to more towns, even if it's in Western Kenya. I think the demand is there, and you can capture different pockets of value. Yeah, thank you. That is what I would say.
Yeah, I think actually you pretty much covered my next question, which I was going to ask specific areas that you could recommend us to innovate maybe and improve further. And I think your answers actually grasped that question. So maybe I'll just move to the next, and maybe you could provide an example of climate financing, and how can we apply it within our aquaculture industry?
Yeah, and actually maybe something on innovation. I think you mentioned something about there was something I saw, the utilization of the oil that once you I think fry the fish, there was that surplus oil that was coming in, and I think there was an initiative to try and either come up with a biofuel or something along that line. And yeah, I think that was also something that I thought was of interest, in terms of course, managing waste, and apart from that, actually coming up with something valuable that you can actually sell. But yeah, coming around climate finance, I think for me, this will likely be something for the future, as long as you adopt the relevant standards around sustainability. My sense is that those standards will allow you to tap into this green or climate finance. Of course, it depends. Are you doing capital expenditure, or are you doing working capital? But there are increasingly now pockets of money which are focusing in this space, specifically. And my sense is that it's just a matter of documentation. It's almost like just a normal type of financing, but now you just need to take a few more steps and to document those initiatives that you are doing.
Yeah.
How do you ensure that they're documented, and you can actually prove that either even with places where you are slightly behind, then you're making a bit of progress to improve on those initiatives. So I think documentation around the initiatives is really critical, and generally green finance is just a matter of documentation and ensuring you document what you are doing and all the important elements that are required. I think at the start of the podcast, I did mention about the GRI standards, and that's usually a good place to start, because they have specific topics, because there's a material topic, the specific topics or subtopics where you're able to follow through and see what are these important topics that are relevant for my sector in the aquaculture sector, and then start tracking specific either key performance indicators on each of those. And that will ensure that the time you need to tap into this sort of financing, you actually have the documentation to support the initiatives that you're already doing. Because sometimes it's just a matter of having that data and just tracking it. If once you start 1 year, the next year you'll keep on improving, and over time you'll be able to monitor and see, are you improving? What are your areas of weakness? How can you improve on it? Just the same way you collect financial data, you just start collecting this data around the impact that you can have, that you're having on the society, and climate, and there are the different topics there that can guide you on that. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, one thing that we are also grappling with, as much as we are trying to document everything that we are doing, but maybe you can just give us an overview. What's in general, what's the landscape of climate and sustainable financing in Kenya? What does it look like? I mean, is there a shortfall in the availability of funds, or, I mean, exactly where do we stand?
Actually, we do have quite a bit of funding, especially with the commercial banks. A lot of it is sitting with commercial banks, but increasingly also for us as an investment bank, we're trying to figure out if we can come up with a solution, which we should also be able to tap and provide that to the market. Of course, the venture capital, private equity funds do have some sort of capital, but we think if you look at commercial banks, they behave the way commercial banks do. They are doing lending essentially, and they're still in the mindset of protecting depositor money. And even when they do the lending, the requirements are almost in that mechanism. But our sense is that if we can look at investment banking or capital market instrument, there's room to be able to grow green finance through the capital markets. And our sense is to be able to do that and tap into the funding that is currently available across the market. Because the funding is there, especially globally, but there's different requirements in being able to tap it. And of course, it's also the readiness of the clients in mind, because the clients have to be ready to be able to receive the funding with that data that's relevant in addition to the financial data. But I would say that there are different sources of funding, both debt as well as equity, but equity in a less format. But it's there, and we're also making initiatives to try and see if we can grow that and bring it through the capital markets, to be able to supplement what is already in place with the commercial banks.
Okay, I think that is well covered. Maybe the last one, I just wanted to ask, how can TAC and maybe Jumbo position itself to leverage on the availability of these funds?
I think it's to look at the financing, because you have the different business lines and each of them has its own uniqueness. There are some clients who might want to focus on different, just certain areas. Let's say feeds. You have somebody who's specialist and decide, well, I want to focus around feeds. Of course, internally, you'll have to have had reporting, which is on a financial basis around feeds and looking at the growth trajectory of that line, as well as the sustainability metrics around that space and the value chains around it. And then if it's fish and so forth. So each business would have to report on its own way, and then you have the total reporting for the aquaculture as a consortium. I believe you will be up and there. Ultimately, the business still has to be profitable. So you need to look at more business. Your strategy has to be right. Just the same way you just do your normal business strategy, going to market and so forth. So the money, you look at it, I think you're just hoping that it's maybe concessional in nature, or maybe even just available, because sometimes in a high interest environment, funding is just not available at all, or at least it's there and it's very expensive. So sometimes just being able to access the funding is really critical. And once you have a bit of, you're making progress around both your sustainability metrics as well as your sustainability metrics, then it makes sure that at least you're able to make some progress when you're looking for funding. And when you're talking to funders, try and also inquire whether they have some green finance buckets. Sometimes they might just think you are a conventional farm and you've not just put in the effort around data around sustainability. And you might realize that you are now being moved to a different department, and maybe things are moving a little bit faster, or maybe the thresholds that are needed are slightly lower in terms of the security requirement, or the flexibility in the type of financing. So I think it's just being able to understand the organization that you're dealing with, or the financier, and trying to see if they have something special for you as an entity who would have done a little bit more extra in terms of this space.
Okay, thank you, Eric. I think Sabila, you can take it over. I'll close it from there. I think you're muted, Sabila.
Eric, I hope you get time to visit us again. I will make sure we have enough pineapples.
Thank you very much, Sabila, and thank you for your kind hospitality. Yes, you did ask me for how it come, and you provided a five-star treatment when you're asking me. And yeah, I liked the pineapples, and thank you very much for that. And yeah, if I find time coming over in Western Kenya, I'll definitely pay you a visit. I'd like to see the new facility once it's moved to the new location. I really thought it was a very promising venture on Lake Victoria, just to see how the facility would have been organized. And also as if you think about a family visit or something, maybe your hospitality business, I think it also has it will probably get some legs on that end. So yeah, really appreciated your time, and yeah, we'll visit you if I get time. Thank you very much.
Now, as a person, as Eric, have you had interest in aquaculture or agriculture in general?
Yes, actually, I do have a farm. It's about 80 kilometers from Nairobi, so pretty near. So I, every now and again over the weekends, I go there. I grow chili for export. I've grown tomatoes in the past, and a greenhouse. And I've tried fish farming, and in fact, it's something I think I'll take it up again, having seen what you're doing. I probably can't do all those fancy things you do, but maybe just as a farmer, maybe you can support me or something. I can get expertise as one of your outgrowers, and it's something that I like to do. I grew up in a farming community. So my parents, my father was a maize breeder, and he did quite a bit of maize seeds. I think even as at today, I would say almost 50% of the maize seeds in Kenya, the seeds themselves, he was involved in breeding. So farming is something that was I grew up with, and also we grew maize quite a lot and vegetables. So farming is something that I really like and enjoy. Yeah, and I like doing it, and I guess in some way it's also therapeutic.
Okay. Now, at the end of the day, how do we measure the financial impact of implementing sustainable finance? How do we measure it? How do we know that we are making steps, we are developing, or we are adding value?
Yeah, I think it shouldn't be too expensive when I think about it. When you think of, for example, about installing solar in your facility, there's an initial upfront cost, but it saves you on your utility bills. And so to a certain extent, you're looking at an initial investment, and there's a payback period that you're looking at where you'd be saving on your utility bills. If you're looking at, for example, doing, paying fair wages for your workers and your suppliers and the supply chain, it really entrenches the business in a way that ensures that it can grow in the long term. So there has to be a good balance of that, and so there are usually commercial imperatives, but I think at the end of the day, if you do it right at the farm level and across your value chain, you'll be able to do that, and you probably also get better brand recognition in the market. And I think the business should do well. So it should be something that's just operationally within your initiatives. It doesn't make sense to pollute waters that you're using, yet you can just put in a bit of effort to do the purification systems. And these initiatives around sustainability, it's a matter of progress. Think about climate change, just planting trees. You can just have a matrix. How many more trees have you planted this year? Or how much better are you doing on your initiatives on a year-to-year basis? I think all these initiatives might have a cost implication, but I think they balance themselves out with the overall benefit and the likelihood of the business being here over many years and growing over many years. So I think that's something that one has to balance it carefully. But for me, I feel that that's something that really needs to be done right at the get-go. And there are always ways you can improve, all these things, even with the financial considerations.
Yeah, so Santino, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, Eric, just something came into my mind, and maybe I can just ask you, in terms of the nationally determined contributions, how did you Kenya's performance? I mean, in terms of commitments.
So generally, if you look at, for example, the overall pollution, generally Africa and even specifically Kenya, we are not major polluters, in the global economy. One of the things, though, and you've rightly pointed out, is that even though we are not major polluters, we've also set ourselves some targets, and we are moving. I think we are still slightly behind. I think the last time I saw the figures, I think we're about 40% of the target. So we are still behind, but I think other countries were as much as 20. They had only achieved 20% of the objectives. Obviously, as we go ahead, there's needs for concerted effort to ensure that the different sectors, their locations on the different sectors, each of the sectors is aware of what the government has committed, because I think maybe there was public participation, but also for each sector to be aware of what contribution they need to make, and for each of the companies in those sectors to make those initiatives individually. Obviously, you need data, because without data, you cannot clearly articulate the achievement which has been done. But I think I would say as a country, we almost naturally a sustainable ecosystem. We, if you think about a lot of the things we do as an economy, if it's a road being constructed, there's usually a lot of thought putting around the damage to the trees around the road. There's a lot of concern around our national parks if they are being invaded, and the protection around of such ecosystem, our water systems. So I think as an economy, we've always, protection of the environment has been very naturally ingrained in us, and it's been easier for us to make progress. I even think sometimes we just don't document it, and that can also be our undoing. And I know, for example, 15 years ago, we were doing an infrastructure bond for our largest electricity generator, Kengen. And we did it as a plain vanilla infrastructure bond. But when you think about it today, we would have just done a few more things, documentation, and called it a green bond. And it would have been a green instrument. So we were always doing these things. I think there's a documentation component, which is where we, even for us as an investment bank, we really want to work with clients to ensure that they can be able to move a bit more in terms of the documentation and to really ensure that they can support the initiatives that they are doing. The solar installation that you are doing, I'm sure maybe you might have had a generator before. Maybe you had something else, and now you've moved into a generator. You've already made some progress because the emissions which are coming out from diesel, now you've moved to a cleaner energy. But if you don't document that change, which is probably part of nationally determined contribution, that does not really come out clearly. And so that documentation, from my standpoint, is really more critical for most of the organizations that we are dealing with. And naturally, for most of the organizations we've seen, they are already very, very ahead in just trying to move towards more sustainable business models.
Okay, thank you. And maybe you had addressed this before, but I can just ask again, just in case. As an investment bank, how does SIB measure the financial impact of implementing sustainable practices in aquaculture?
Yeah, so for us, we are essentially an intermediary. And so as an intermediary, we'll now be looking at what the actual client is doing, because there's usually different standards for different entities. So our focus now is to try and see how many of these businesses that we are serving are sustainable, or at least you tap sustainable finance and they comply in that matrix. So I would imagine in future, there may well be a future where we do not handle companies which do not have initiatives around managing climate change. So the financial sector, there's also initiatives around greening the financial sector, and there are different targets. I think the largest bank in Kenya, KCB, has a target, I think, of having its loan book at 25% of its loan book, I think by 2025. I don't know whether they still have that target. It's a very ambitious one, but you can imagine that step change. We are seeing the type of cement in the construction sector. We are now seeing green cements coming in. Bamburi Cement has that range of green cement. So when you're doing construction, then there's those type of cements that you can use. When you look at the sector, the housing sector, there are different tools which are now in place. I know the EDGE tool, which allows the certification of green buildings, which ensures that even for small ordinary buildings, you can still get your building certified. And increasingly, when financing is being done, we are increasingly realizing that it's very difficult to get financing if your building is not green certified, especially for the large commercial buildings. And we are seeing all around increasingly these buildings being sustainable. And it's not just green for the sake of it. it's a better quality of ambience in the building. It's protection of the environment in terms of the materials and so forth. So at the end of the day, I think it's something that is going on, but it will take time. So it's a journey. So if you look at different sectors, they're making different steps towards that progress that we are talking about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you much, Eric. Sabila, maybe you can take it over now and close.
Eric,
Yes.
I think the session has been very informative. We can agree, Santino, yes, that you have learned a lot.
Within a short time.
Yeah, within a short time, and we actually kept time.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, we were able to get all that information, in less than an hour. We are very grateful for taking your time to come and share with us. And our team will definitely incorporate your suggestions and everything else so that we can be at par with the regulations and what is expected of us. Yeah,
Thank you very much, Sabila. I really appreciate your time, as well as Santino. It was a good conversation. I don't think I've ever had like a concise conversation around sustainable finance in the way that you've put it. So really appreciate the discussion we've had around your project and your businesses. And for me, it's just to wish you the very best, and hopefully we'll just be around and see you succeed. And feel free to reach out anytime if you need any clarification, and hopefully I can also reach out if I need a bit of expertise on the space that you're in. But otherwise, it was also a great session for me. Thank you.